Welcome to Freedom Cast, a podcast dedicated to interviewing star icons and entrepreneurs who have encouraged others to become more healthy and active. My name is Ashton, and it's my pleasure to host you as we take another trip through the fitness industry. It's entertaining and informative, and I hope it makes fitness more exciting and special to you in your own fitness journey. Freedom Cast is supported by Freedom Fitness Equipment in Charlotte, North Carolina. Freedom Fitness Equipment serves the health and fitness community nationwide, from free weights and strength equipment for home gyms and studios to cardio and conditioning equipment for commercial spaces. Check them out at freedomfitnessequipment.com. Let's get rolling with today's show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Freedom Cast podcast, and it's my pleasure to welcome David Abernethy, who's the co-owner of Tsunami Bar and developer of that particular piece of training gear. Welcome, David. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Ashton. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you give people who don't know about anything about you, can you give people a little bit of a brief background on where you came from and then leading up to like your college career and developing the bar itself?
Sure. So I was brought up in Denver and Lincoln, North Carolina, Lincoln County up there, Lake Norman area, close to you guys up there in Charlotte. That's where I grew up. Went to East Lincoln High School. After that, I played ran track, actually threw the shot and discus, and then also played football there. And then I went on to play football at Methodist University, and then transferred to Western Carolina and finished up my last 3 years at Western. Became a football GA there, and then my strength coach that was there, John Sisk, went to Clemson. And so when he went to Clemson, we had a golf tournament, and I was a football GA up there at Western Carolina. He's like, "Hey, you want to come to Clemson?" I'm like, "Sure." And so that's how I got to Clemson. That's how I became a strength coach. And so I became a GA there at Clemson. Then I got a full-time job, my first job at Ole Miss back in 2001. Ruben Mendoza was the head strength coach. He was a mentor of mine. And David Cutcliffe was the head coach there.
Wow.
Eli Manning was playing there with us at the time. And
oh, wow.
I got to see some pretty cool athletes while I was there. Then I became the head strength coach at Western Kentucky University. I don't know if you know the Harbaugh family. Jack Harbaugh just retired. David Elson took over and hired me from Ole Miss. And so I was there 2 years. My daughter was born. My wife was like, "Hey, let's get back close to home." And so Clemson called Coach Batson, who gave me my job as a strength coach at Clemson, asked me to come back home in 2005. And so I was there from 2005 to 2012. In 2011, I met Gordon Brown. I was speaking at Wofford College just about dynamic effort training, conjugate training, a lot of West Side principles. And it intrigued him. And he's a composite expert. He's an engineer, former Navy captain, and just a very intelligent guy, very cerebral guy. And so we started, putting thoughts together. He brought me in a little small stick. It had fiberglass inside of it. It had plastic on the outside. It was about 36 inches long. He said, "What can you do with this?" I'm like, "Not very much," And I was very critical at first. And then as we started talking and developing, he made me one that was about 10 feet long. And I started pass setting with it. And then I said, "Well, what if we made a barbell out of this?" And so he would go back and forth. He'd bring it in. I would play with it. I said, "Do this, do that." He would go back and develop it. So that happened for about 6 months until we finally got an actual barbell. And we put plates on it one day. Adam Smotherman, who's the head strength coach in Virginia right now, who was our GA at the time, we were playing. I said, "Man, Adam," I said, feel this pump, and it was crazy looking. I mean, I know the bar was flexing back and forth, which was so out there against what we're doing, traditionally, steel barbell. You get a little whip out of an Olympic barbell. You get a little oscillation out of it, but not like that. And so we started squatting with it. We started cleaning with it. We started pass setting with it. We hooked straps up to the squat rack and started doing jammer exercises. And from there, I was like, "This is pretty cool." And then our players started using it. And they really liked it. And then Gordon, he's like, "You want to start a business?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm a coach. I don't know anything about business." I said, "What's it going to cost me?" He said, "Well, about 10 grand to start." And I was like, "Oh my gosh," And so how am I going to tell my wife this? And so I go home, I get my money, write him a check. We go see the lawyers, we get it started. And now we've been going at this for a little over 10 years now, and we're all over the world. We're in China and Germany, and
wow.
We sold bars in Israel and Australia, and Canada. We're all over. When NFL teams, NFL players use it. Major League Baseball, NBA. Mostly, we're strongest in the Southeast because that's our reach,
Mm-hmm.
But we're starting to get a lot of calls on the West Coast now. So we've been around the world, but now we're getting to the West Coast, which is kind of crazy that it took that long to get to the West Coast. But we're getting a lot of calls now from the West Coast, and had a chance to go speak at Parisi Speed School this year on it. Went out to Denver, Colorado, and spoke to the Functional Aging Institute about it. And so we're touching all ends of the spectrum, from youth. My son started training with a bar when he was 4 years old. And we're touching people that are over 90 years old that come into our Tsunami Bar Training Center now on a walker, and they sit down and they use our multi-sticks just to get the resistance because they can't handle the steel. They can't handle the weight. Mm-hmm. And so this stick weighs 3 pounds, but they can turn it into 30 pounds or 50 pounds or 60 pounds just by the oscillation and movement of the bar, just by physics. They can create force without mass, which is a lot safer, and they can actually do it. And it's fun. It's different,
Yeah.
So that's kind of the story. It's kind of the backdrop behind it all.
I like it. Can you tell us a little bit more about the construction of that Tsunami Bar? Like you mentioned a little bit about it with the fiberglass interior and what's unique about it with loading without having the mass. But what's particularly unique about the Tsunami Bar, and how exactly does it work?
Yeah. So the bar, when we first started, of course, we used PVC pipe. Do not do that. Do not try to make your own at home because it will break. Okay. That's kind of where we got started. We always use PVC pipes to do, starting points of training, like how to do technique, how to squat, how to bench, how to clean, flexibility, things like that. It's fine for that. When you try to load weight on it, it's not going to work. So we had to get a special composite made that's partly rubber, partly thermoplastic. The one to give it the rigidity. Plastic gives it more rigidity, but the rubber component in it gives it the flexibility. So if you took the fiberglass out of the bar and just bent it in half, it would bend like a straw that you get at a restaurant. And so inside of that is fiberglass rods. So the fiberglass rods actually what makes it work. It gives it its Boeing, it's I call it the Boeing effect, the whip, so basically if you took the strings off a bow, like a bow and arrow, and you stuck it inside the tube, that's what it would be. Oh. And some people ask me, will the bar break? Well, you could bend it, until it won't return, but you can't really break it. Now you can saw the end of it off. You could take a saw and cut it, but for it actually breaking, it would be I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm gonna say it hasn't happened, And so if the fiberglass would give, it would just kind of splinter. You know what I mean? So if you ever seen fiberglass, how it works, fiberglass is not going to snap. It's got fiber in it. It's just going to crinkle. And same way with the tube. If it gets to the point where it crinkles, then it's no good no more. But that's kind of the materials that it's used. But the typical barbell, you put weight on the inside, and weight on the inside, you're just using mass, and so there's really not that much whip on the bar. Mm-hmm. I have seen someone, I can't think of who it is, has actually made extensions to put on the end of a barbell.
Yes.
And they're actually getting more flex on a deadlift, and they're getting more flex on a squat as they put those extensions on there. The only negative that I see to that is it makes the bar about 10 to 12 feet long, it seems like. Mm-hmm. Did I lose you?
Nope, I'm still here. You got me?
Yeah, I just lost your picture for a sec. I didn't know if I So, they're on the right page. They're on the right. They're heading the right way with what they're thinking, because they're getting a little bit more whip and they're getting a little more drag out of the bar. What really makes it work is the dynamic effort of it. In the past, we've always used, this kind of got a little more backdrop to this. Joey Batson, who was my mentor at Clemson for 10 years and still is, he's, I hired his son, Michael, he's part of my family.
Nice.
And so he was a West Side guy. He was a strength coach at Bowling Green State, where Louis was at up there in Ohio. So he'd go visit Louis back in I don't know if it was the late 80s, early 90s. He was doing West Side before it was cool, and West Side really didn't get picked up big until probably mid 2000s, but we were doing it, at Western Carolina with my strength coach John Sis because of Coach Batts and Joey, and we were doing board presses, rack lockouts, boards on the chest, accommodative resistance, dynamic effort. So to go back to the bar, it's the dynamic effort side. So we always use chains and bands using sub-maximal weight, having accommodative resistance. So as the band goes to lockout, as the chain goes to lockout, you got to accommodate to that resistance, right? Same way with Tsunami Bar. You got to accommodate to the whip of the bar. So when the bar goes up and the bar goes down, I tell, less educated athletes, I said, just look for the smile and the frowny face. We want to be symmetrical as possible, So we're looking for co-contractions. So we want to have co-contractions. So we're not only training the central nervous system, we're also training the fascia. We're also training the muscle attachments. We're also training the skeletal muscular system. And also we can create bone density. So you're getting all those things in a safer realm because you're not getting the load all the time. So the old way of doing things was time under tension, right? Bodybuilding, powerlifting.
Right.
So now we're taking that same idea and making it time under active tension, right? So we're trying to add speed to the bar, movement to the bar. How do we transfer the weight room to the field of competition, whether that be on the football field, the basketball court, the diamond, the tennis court, the pool, whatever your competition is, or in some people's cases, life, how do we help improve your life, make you stronger in life without beating you up?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the mindset behind Tsunami Bar for us is we want to make you stronger. We want to help you get you there faster. We want you to be able to move faster. We want you to be able to move better, have longer range of motion, but also improve your shelf life, So the shelf life, people don't realize that we can get guys strong, but do we beat them up on the way there? How much do we beat them up? And then when they get in competition, they really get beat up. They may be strong the first 4 games of a football season. I'm just going to use football as an example. The first 4 games when they start getting beat up, maybe we beat them up too much in the weight room. We got them super strong, but when you get in competition, they're doing max effort in practice. They're doing max effort on game day.
Right.
I do max effort in season as well. And so eventually something's got to give, So I'm thinking about it from a sport aspect, mindset. It's a little bit different than a home gym aspect, but it'll still translate. It'll still transfer, and you'll get stronger, like we just had, I don't know if you guys seen Nick Chubb. It was on ESPN Sports Center. He was squatting 610 on the Tsunami Bar. The backdrop behind that is that he actually trained with that bar for 8 weeks. Then he put a steel barbell on his back toward the last part of his training. He didn't train with a steel barbell the whole time.
Wow.
He put that steel on his back on like week 7 or 8, and he set a PR. I think he did like 650 for a couple. Then he power cleaned 405. That's a strong man right there. That is.
Yeah, no kidding.
I haven't seen many guys that strong. He's a 1% of the 1%. And he can move too. You can see powerlifters do that, but they really can't move. They can move inside and outside the rack. About it.
It's true. Was so the Tsunami Bar adds a level of destabilization to the lift, and then that'll work all of your stabilizing muscles, like you were mentioning. It'll increase your strength and power and endurance. And I'm assuming for athletes that is it working more of the musculature than you're saying it's working much more of the musculature than a regular bar would because of the movement up and down?
Yeah. So it's not so much, it is working the muscle. And so we did a remote EMG on athletes. We tested them on our lab at Furman University. So when we tested those athletes, we found out we had 3 times more muscle activation based off the EMG testing.
Wow.
EMG was telling us that. Okay. All right. And so therefore we were also getting three times more stabilization work. And here's the thing. There's no such thing really as a stabilizing muscle. You basically have prime movers. You have an anterior chain and a posterior chain.
Okay.
One becomes the stabilizer, one becomes the prime mover, and they work in locomotion. So that's what I mean by co-contractions. They're working together, right?
Okay.
So if you can think about a train working, the front wheel is not a stabilizer and the back wheel is not a prime mover. They're both, right? So when one is pushing, one is pulling, right? And so the push-pull, we actually have a patent on the push-pull. So the push-pull method is what creates the actual force behind the bar. So we want to push the bar and pull the bar. Now you can also just do an eccentric movement where you control it and you got oscillations moving on the bar. You can also do a concentric push on it where you work on bar speed. You can also do an isometric hold where you sit at the bottom, pause, and fire out. Same way on the bench press, the squat, deadlift, whatever you want to do. So in those things, what I tell my son, who's a middle school football player and wrestler, he's been training Tsunami Bar since he was 4 years old. And I tell him, I said, son, you think about eccentric movements, okay? Think about eccentric, concentric, isometric. Eccentric is we're fighting gravity. We're trying to stop gravity. Concentric, we're trying to push gravity, push it away from us, right? And then isometric, we're trying to suspend gravity. So I try to make it to where a young kid can understand it. So now he understands how to train and what point to stop the bar or control the bar on the way down, to stop the bar and then reverse the bar back in a concentric movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So I try to put it on the cookie shelf for him,
Nice.
And sometimes I got to put it on the cookie shelf for myself too, but it's still just trying to make sense of it. I had to prove to myself back in 2012 that this really worked, because I'm from the old school, man. It's about the steel, it's about the steel, and my gosh, we don't use the steel, you're not getting strong, That's one way to get strong.
Yeah.
Is it the best way now to get strong? It still can be. You just got to be careful, because what I found through lifting heavy over the years, if I pushed and pushed and pushed, eventually I broke. If your muscles are made of composites and your body's made of composites, and all these fibers and everything, steel is eventually going to break fibers, right, over time. So when the steel barbell sits on your back, or puts in your hands, that pressure point is going to be right there. It's going to come down right at that pressure point.
Yeah. If
you got a Tsunami Bar, or let's say something else. If you got a weighted vest on you, you're spreading the weight. You're spreading the weight of the force. So all the force is not coming into one spot. It's being spread all over. So if you got a weighted vest on your back and you got all that fascia on your back, your shoulders, then you're also getting more activation there too.
Nice.
So I'm trying to think, how can we help the military? How can we help the military with this? I wish I could find a way to put one of these bars on like a backpack when these guys go on their run.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So that's something I'm trying to figure out now too, And we're also trying to figure out how to put accelerometers on the bar to see the actual amount of speed and force we're getting.
Ooh.
Use that equation, and then that'll give us an actual number, an actual strength number. The general pop that doesn't have the same education that we have can actually see if it's working and get something quick, because people want to know, what am I doing? How much pushing here? I know I've got 25-pound weight on the bar. I got a 15-pound bar, and if I move it 3 times the amount of the weight on the bar, then I'm probably going to be at about 200 or 300 pounds at the crest and the trough of the lift. Wow. So as the bar waves, or as it waves up and down, you can actually increase it 3. We've even seen up to 7 times the amount.
Wow.
Using the actual accelerometers on the bar. So we put on a force plate, and we use accelerometers, and we use the remote EMGs to actually try to get testing. Now, it's impossible. It's not impossible. It's just very expensive for the general population to be able to test and see those numbers. Right. We're trying to find a simple, inexpensive way for people to have that testing ability at their home or in schools or wherever,
I like that. I love the integration of technology. That's a big thing that's becoming, particularly in the home gym space, that I've noticed. A lot of these guys were talking about integrating technology with like racks and bars and things like that. So that's super exciting. Quick, most of our audience is probably more familiar with the earthquake or the bamboo bar. So how is the Tsunami Bar different than those training tools?
Yeah, so those bars are good bars. I mean, they're good bars. And so what they do is you load up and you control. You're not using it for speed. Those bars are made for eccentric, and they're slower eccentric, concentric movements. But what you're getting is that perturbation, that oscillation, hanging in front with a band or with a hook or some type of strap.
Right.
It's bending weight off of it, right?
Okay.
So when you use a Tsunami Bar, you're actually creating a force that by pushing and pulling it, you want to create more speed that creates a force, right? There's the difference in the two. You can do the same thing with Tsunami Bars you can with those other bars, the bamboo, all those bars, but you can't get the whip right on the way back up. You can't get the push pull.
Okay.
Those bars don't have the same whip. Those bars are pretty stiff, and they're not made to perform that way. So we made the Tsunami Bar to perform in movement. So you could put a bamboo bar on your back, and you could walk, or you can bench with it, or you can hang it over your head, and you'd have good oscillation. I've used them before. They're good. It's just different than a Tsunami Bar. Tsunami Bar is movement. It's the more you move, the more it's going to whip, the more it's going to flex. And if you can make it put on your back or on your hands, and you actually make it part of your body, then you're getting all that force into your body and back out. So we want to put force in the ground, but as you push it away, we want force coming out of the ground too. We want to develop ground reaction forces. That's why the fascia, all the muscle attachments and everything are so important, because there's studies out there now that say there's 8 times more sensory receptors in the fascia than there is in the muscle.
Interesting.
This comes from Bill Parisi, and this is from the Australians that are studying out there in Australia. They're studying the kangaroo and the koala bear. All right, they both have the same type of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle. They have the same muscle groups. What's the difference between the kangaroo and the koala is the fascia in its hind legs. So what they're saying is, in Bill Parisi's book, is that when the kangaroo jumps, or when he jumps 6 feet, or he's just barely walking, he expands more energy than he does when he's jumping 40 miles an hour or 44 miles an hour, 40 feet at a time. And so by having that fascia, the fascia doesn't get fatigued as quick, and it can return force quicker. It's like a rubber band back there. The muscle is more, it's we're kind of getting away from what we were taught back in the day. Fast twitch, slow twitch, type A, type B, type X, those are still important because you got to have those muscles to do that. But you look at smaller athletes now who are faster, stronger, more powerful, leaner, longer. I mean, you look at all those bodybuilders. I mean, and I love them, and I'm a big guy too, but we just can't move like those smaller guys. And they're just as powerful. They're just as powerful. Look at the NFL. Big, long, lean guys. Like the linemen now are big, long, and lean, and look at the fascia, the muscle attachment they have on them. Yeah. I think about a guy like Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow, the wide receiver for the Oakland Raiders.
Oh, okay. Yep.
He's not a very, I mean, if you and I looked at him on the street, we'd be like, that's just an everyday Joe right there. And compared to DK Metcalf, who's another great athlete, right? But Hunter Renfrow is an all-pro guy. But he's got the ability, man, to go and get what he's got. I think he's maximizing every cell in his body when he's running routes. I mean, just nothing against him. He just doesn't look like a great athlete, but he is, though. He's got the ability to recruit at a high level. But he's also smart and intelligent. He understands how to move his body. And I think that's important too, is having knowledge too, not just being a big brute.
Yeah.
We used to say, look like Tarzan, but have a Jane mentality. So we got to be careful. He's a big old good looking dude, but he may not be able to move.
Right. From a practical outcomes standpoint, so what differences have you noticed on athletes that are using this bar versus the ones that aren't? Are they faster, stronger, jump higher, like verticals better? What kind of things are you seeing?
Yeah, especially the vertical jump, the broad jump. Referring back to Nick Chubb, his strength went up, and he trained predominantly with Tsunami Bar. We built his high school weight room, and that's kind of how he got hooked up with it. He got hooked up with his high school strength coach and head coach. And so those guys are training big time with Tsunami down there. And so we've seen strength numbers go up, and we've seen strength numbers go up before the Tsunami Bar using dynamic method, chains and bands. And then we would combo it up, Speed Force Max is kind of what we would do. We would do a dynamic effort. We would do more of a linear periodization type deal in the middle, and then we do a max effort at the end. So you're training through your energy. By training this way, you're hitting more of your energy systems too: ATP, CP, oxidative. So you follow them in an order. One's more like a rocket fuel, one's like a gasoline, and one's like a diesel fuel. The diesel fuel is strong, but it can't move as fast, right? It's not as limber. The ATP is like straight sugar, straight octane, man. You hit nitrogen, you hit it, boom, but then it's gone. It's a good starting strength, so that's kind of how we're training through the processes of using the energy system in order to best gain strength as well. So you got to keep that in mind as well as you're training. So yeah, I've seen, guys' verticals go up tremendously. I could tell you a lot of stories. I just don't want to tell you too much without asking them.
Sure.
Some of these colleges and stuff. I just don't want to put it out there.
Oh, that's fine.
The only reason I talk about Nick Chubb because it was on social media.
Yep.
And we actually got to see it for ourselves. How strong it was. And people don't realize when he squatted at 6'10" at the bottom, that weight's flexing at the bottom. When he goes to stop that weight, so you think about the eccentric movement on the way down. And then as he isometrically stops gravity from coming, tries to suspend it, that bar is still coming down. So he had to take that compression force and return it back up into a concentric movement.
It's crazy.
I know so 6'10", I'm not saying, if he had 225 on there and he moved the bar about 3 feet per second, he could triple the amount of weight on the bar. Now 6'10", he wasn't moving the bar fast.
Yeah.
Still, he did more than 6'10" on that squat. He did a lot more. I just to guess, he's probably 800-900 pounds on that bottom force on that push down.
Yeah, absolutely. Holy cow.
So think about a weight coming down on your back.
Oh yeah.
And then right when you get ready to push away, there's a little bit more coming down on top of you.
Yep.
That's what that's like.
Not an easy thing.
And he did it a couple times too,
Wow. That's a monster.
Yeah.
So you've been coaching for quite a while. You've done a lot of coaching for college athletes. What is the biggest thing that's typically missing from training regimens when you're coming in there for the first time, as set up by previous coaches in college sports?
So the number one thing, to start any training is your diet, right? Eating right. You got to fuel your body. And sometimes, it's not just, everybody's like, well, I got to have this perfect diet, man. Sometimes we just want guys to eat. A lot of guys coming out of high school just don't eat, period. Yeah. So when you're starting as a strength coach, you kind of got to give and take as you go. You want them to have this perfect diet, but man, you just want them to eat sometimes. So you're just trying to put calories in their body just to get them moving. You can mow your grass all day long, but if you don't put any fertilizer or water on, it's never going to grow. It's not going to grow correctly. And then you need sunshine too. Same way with nutrition and training. So it all starts with, you cannot train a bad diet. In college coaching, we always said this: you can't train a bad diet. You can't out-train bad players, and you can't out-train bad coaching either. So you got to have all of it to be great. You look at the great ones; they got it all. They got a great nutrition plan, they got great players, and they got great coaching. Consistent. They're consistent all around. So I say the big word too is consistency. When you're trying to build anything, I always try to relate to put money in the bank with the players. I'm like, if you want to build wealth, you got to put money in the bank. You can't put money in one day and take more out the next, by going out and smashing alcohol or doing drugs or whatever. You got to be consistent, I'm not saying you can't do those things. There's a time and place. You got to, time in your life that, and playing sports is not that time, because it's going to dehydrate you. It's going to make you lackadaisical. I'm not saying you can't do those things later on if they're legal in your area. You can do what you want to do, but when you're playing a sport, you can't be like the general population. You got to be, if you're going to try to be common like everybody else, you're going to be common. You're going to be out there with them. You got to be uncommon.
Yep.
You got to be uncommon. I don't think there's really any secret to training at all either. I just think the best do the common things in an uncommon way. Okay. They just try to find, that's kind of why I look at the Tsunami Bar. What's common? The steel barbell, right? That's common to everybody. What's uncommon? The Tsunami Bar. I'm not saying we're trying to replace the steel barbell. We're just trying to add to it and make it better.
Right.
I'm a strength coach. I trained a steel barbell my whole life. Yep. Still do. And, but I know by marrying it with the Tsunami Bar, you can take it to another level.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from a college football standpoint specifically, Are there any key weaknesses that you saw as a coach coming out of high school that college football athletes really had to focus on in their training? I mean, nutrition obviously being important, but anything else?
Yeah. Yeah. So just learning to be accountable, learning to be disciplined, learning to be part of a team. When you're in high school, you're the best player. It's all about you on that team. A lot of times, you get all the attention. And when you get to college, and I'm going to go to training on this too, but I'm just kind of giving you the whole backdrop of the whole thing. So learning to be on a team with a bunch of great players, and learning to put the team before yourself, because when you're growing up, you're getting recruited. You got to learn to be de-recruited in a sense, because in high school coming up, you may even been in rec ball, middle school, high school. You were the best player. So you're always looked up upon, and you're always being, I call it being stroked and petted, and you're the prize, pony over here. And then when you go to college, it's not that way anymore. You got to get de-recruited. You got to realize, you earned the right to be there. Now you got to earn the right to stay there, and be part of a team. It's like being a champion. You earn the right to be a champion, then you got to earn the right to stay a champion. You got to keep working. You never arrive. It's always a journey, So some of the weaknesses are kids they don't bend as well as they used to. I don't think. I mean, they're and they bend at the waist instead of the knees. There was a guy that played for the Redskins, he was a coach of the Redskins, Dale Lindsey. And when I was a young coach, he came to Western Kentucky and talked to our staff because he played there. And he talked about he wanted, from a Neanderthal type standpoint, we wanted knee bending. Neanderthals kill with their hands, and a caveman killed with a stick. Once he learned how to kill with a stick, he stood upright. And he'd always say, man, we want knee bending, knuckle dragging killers. He said, but when he became a caveman, he stood up tall. He didn't have to bend anymore. He just swung a club to kill his food. So he said, try to have that Neanderthal mentality where you can be a knee bend. And what I'm saying is playing low, no matter what sport it is, basketball, football, baseball, softball, whatever, have a power position, be able to get in a power position and play out that power position is what he was getting. He just told a story to try to help you understand. He's putting the cookie on the cookie shelf for the kids, But I always use that with my young kids too, just because they like to hear it. They're like, "Oh yeah, I like that,"
Nice.
If that makes sense. Just the ability to be able to bend, But now not every high school, but a lot of the top high schools now have, a lot of college strength coaches have left the profession and went to high schools now, and so a lot of these high schools, especially in the Southeast that I know of, and in Texas and around. I mean, they're getting college strength coaches coming into the high schools, so their training is really going to be really, really good in the next 10 years. It's going to be really good. It should really improve because now, I'm in a weight room business now, and their high schools are building college weight rooms everywhere.
That's awesome.
College type weight rooms, and so it's going to keep getting better and better. But just we went from playing outside to playing video games and cell phones. Where kids back in the day didn't have cell phones. They climbed trees and climb under fences and go over fences and this and that. And they didn't have that. So now we need weight rooms more than ever because we don't have those things anymore. We live in neighborhoods.
Right.
And where there are no trees. The tree may grow, but the kid's already grown up by the time it gets to be that big.
It's true.
Because all these neighborhoods and everything.
Yep.
So just teaching a kid how to bend and how to move, and probably one of the best exercises you can teach a young kid how to do is how to bear crawl.
Okay.
Get on the ground. And we call them bear crawls, puma crawls, where you get in a position. Because in sport, your hands, your hips, your feet are what connected to you to being a great athlete. If you can't move those things together, then you're not very fluid. You're not very, productive. So just a simple thing as a bear crawl. When I used to coach all the rec kids, part of my warm-up drill was bear crawls. We'd go out there and we'd start bear crawling. It made the kids give them a total body strength to work on.
Yeah, that's huge. On that same note, just from a training and coaching standpoint, I mean, I would assume, especially for like world-class athletes, that any average trainer could make those, for an untrained athlete that's world-class, they could make them better just by doing some basic stuff. But what sets apart a real coach who really knows what they're doing with really good coaching outcomes from just marginally better coaching in your mind?
Well, it's just the fine tuning. It's kind of like if you could put people refer to this a lot of times. You put a basketball in my hand, and it's okay. You put a basketball in Jordan's hand, he's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the art of coaching. So a guy that's been doing it a long time, coaching 20, 30, 40 years, he sees things that a young guy don't necessarily see all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why they're using all the technology to help aid in that. I think back to the back times where people used to build things without the calculators, without the lasers, with all this other stuff, and they were still pretty good.
Yeah.
Because it was an art. It was an artistry. They were artisans, So that's the same way coaching is. We need science to back it up. We need the technology to kind of, it's kind of our dashboard to see where we are. But there still has to be a wisdom and knowledge and artisan part of that too. How do you mix the art side with the science side? You can't just let science dominate, and you can't just let your art go all over the place. The science kind of keeps it in bound a little bit. I'm trying to answer your question, so I'm getting there. Okay. So it's just the fine tuning. You can just see things, whether on a squat, you're going to work on vertical shin angle. You're going to work on, if he's squatting vertical shin angle, develops hip power. If he works on more of an Olympic type squat, he's going to have more ankle flexibility. So a lot of times we don't combine them both. You're missing one or the other. The shoulder mobility works, so hip and shoulder, joint capsule mobility and strength around those areas, and the ankle mobility, strengthening around, if you're a football player, or even really basketball players get concussions now too, soccer players, strengthen the base of the neck. The diet also helps prevent concussions as well. But I also think pouring into the athlete's mind and the athlete's soul, a young guy can motivate, an old guy can motivate through wisdom. A young guy can have energy and get him excited when he's down.
Yep.
But an old guy can just straight tell him the truth, and say, hey, this is what you're doing right. This is what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to work on. When I was at Western Kentucky, David Elson, who became the head coach of Jack Harbaugh, he said Coach Harbaugh would always say this: mental is the physical, as 3 is the 1, right? So if you think about your body, being in 1 part, but your mind being 3 parts. Yeah. So your mind is your general and your body is the army. So there's a lot of psychological part going into being a great athlete too. And learning to be if you're trying to get to the highest level, learning that you are the CEO of you, and how do I develop myself as a CEO? I don't just get an education one time. I just don't play football one time. I'm always refining my skills. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always reading, studying, podcasts, listen to podcasts, anything I can to give myself an edge, and something to bounce your ideas off of and push them against the grindstone, see if they work or not, So I think those things, just the refining part of it. Anybody can make somebody tired, but only a few can actually coach somebody. Right. You can put, and this is not against. There's a lot of good young coaches out there.
Sure.
But I was a good young coach too. When I was in my 20s. But I look back at myself now like, God, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that or done this, or I'd have handled that differently. And that's what time brings you as a coach. So if you got an old coach that's still in the battle, be scared of him because he hasn't got killed yet. You know what I'm saying? So if you see an old guy in battle in a war, he's an old guy, he's 40, 50, 60 years old. That dude's learned how to survive. So you might want to talk to that guy a little bit. You might want to learn something from him because he's learned how to stay in the game,
Yeah.
So when you're young, you just think, and I was the same way. You just think, man, I've read all these books. We got all this information out, all these new studies, all this new data out. But you know what? The data is going to change in 10 years.
Yeah.
So the guys 10 years behind us are going to come behind us and think they got all the answers because they got all the new data. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so it's all going to keep changing and evolving. And so you got to stay on top of that too. So if you are an older guy, you got to be willing to look at the new data too, because the data from the 80s and the 90s is no longer, it's still good, but it's not the best.
Right.
So you've always got to be educating yourself. An education is not a 4-year college or a high school or 4-year or a master's degree. It's a lifelong study, of your discipline. So you've always got to be willing to make yourself a pro, whatever you're doing. If you're not studying it, you're not a pro anymore. You're an amateur. It's a hobby to you.
Right.
So you got to take your idea from a hobby to being a pro.
Yep. I like that answer. I want to dive a little bit into a different topic because this is my first love, which is strength equipment and fitness equipment in general. But your work with Williams Strength, can you tell us when you first became a co-owner with Williams Strength and how that came about?
Yeah. So when we developed the Tsunami Bar, we'll go back before then. So when I was at Clemson, I've had all different companies that I've worked with, all great companies.
Yeah.
When we were at Clemson the first time, we had a company called Aerohawk, which he no longer makes equipment anymore. He made great stuff, great equipment. And then I went to Ole Miss, and we got there was some old Nebula stuff. You remember Nebula?
Yeah.
We had some Nebula stuff, and they're no longer in business. And then we got Powerlift and some hammer pieces in. You know, Powerlift and hammer were kind of working together, and Powerlift to me at the time was awesome. You know, it was great stuff.
Yeah.
Then I went to Western Kentucky, and we had Sornex. Sornex makes stuff too as well. You know, our company and Sornex actually be in business together. You know, we used to Scott Williams used to build for them. You know, and then of course we went separate ways, and then came back to Clemson, and that's where Coach Batson and I met Mike Ramsey and Scott Williams, and we had Williams Strength in there, and it was this real heavy duty stuff. I was like, man, this is good stuff right here. This is, you know, and of course our company, we build for Elite FTS too, Williams Strength. You know, built Elite FTS and stuff with Dave Tate. Those guys are awesome over there.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Furman, I had Hammer Strength, you know. So, I mean, all that stuff is good. All these companies are good, you know. But my relationship with Williams Strength started then. And then we developed Tsunami Bar. They said, hey, we'll take this on. They didn't want to at first. Nobody really wanted to. They wanted it, but they didn't want to, like, go dive deep into it and invest money to get it going because it was so different. And they didn't know how to use it. I mean, nobody did. We came up with it. We're trying to figure it out the whole time. And so they said, hey, we'll take it and run with it. And so we took it and run with it. And so 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, Mike said, hey, won't you be my education guy? I'll pay you to come and you know, you can write articles and things like that. So I started doing a thing called a Coach's Corner. And I did that for about 6 months, maybe 8 months. And then in 2018, a couple guys left the company, and he said, hey, you want to come run my sales company, you know, Total Strength and Speed for Williams Strength.
Yep.
So our company's like this. Williams Strength is our equipment. Total Strength and Speed is our sales division. They sell everything. So we can sell cardio, flooring, everything. That's our sales unit. Williams Strength is our company, our brand that we sell. Tsunami Bar is our specialty product. So we're 3 companies in one now.
Nice.
So in 2018, Mike asked me to come, and I was like, I don't know. And then I thought about it. This is pretty cool, man, because I've always liked designing and putting weight rooms together. In 2009, I helped Coach Batson. We had a big piece of plywood on a table in there, and we had cut out pieces of racks. This is before everybody was doing designs on computers and things, you know, all these detailed renders and everything. We're doing, you know, we do crazy renders now. Before they were doing all that, so we drew pictures and cut them all out, and we kept, you know, so you imagine a 4x8 sheet of plywood with a piece of plexiglass on top. That was our weight room in the west end zone.
Nice.
So we cut it to fit the building, and we cut our equipment to scale. We kept moving things around and moving it around and moving it around. And then, of course, Williams Strength built our weight room in 2009. And so that's where that relationship started, really strong. And then 18, I came director of sales. You know, we had our salesmen there, Will Ellison, Steve Moffitt, and Carl Middleton down in Mississippi. And in 2000, and this year, I've just now purchased 35% of the company, so I'm a partner with them now. And so that's kind of where I am now with these guys. And we've hired a new team, and we have more of a team approach now instead of an individual salesman. We all work together. So I wanted to go that route because I wanted to serve. I know as a team, I've always been part of a team. And I told a guy the other day, I said, when you develop yourself as an individual, you make the team stronger. And then when a team gets stronger, it benefits the individual. And so we've had that approach the past year, and man, we just keep growing. It's like our numbers have, you know, we went from, we really doubled our number from 2018 to 2021, just because we took a team approach, and now we're about to go again. We're not going to double that number from last year, but we're going to take that number another, on top of it. Again, we're going to take another big step this year. And as we get our team developed even more, we're going to probably take another big step for next year. The forecast down the road looks really awesome. And so that's kind of where we are right now, just taking a team approach. And where one guy might be weak in one area, another guy's strength picks it up, just like a team. Yep. So you got offensive linemen, you got quarterbacks, you got skill players, you got D linemen, linebackers. Everybody's got a certain skill that they can bring to the team and make it better. And some people are deficient in other areas too. So one guy's strength picks up another guy's weakness and vice versa, right? And so that's kind of how we are there now.
I love it. I'm curious, just from because I like nerding out about this kind of stuff. What's the best training or slash gym setup that you've seen at a school that's kind of already in place? Not something you guys have installed, but just something that you've seen that you've been really impressed with.
Yeah. Are you talking about college, high school, or what?
Let's go college.
Okay. Well, I just seen where Play did one at Florida. This recently opened it up. I thought it looked awesome. Just the color designs and everything. Georgia by Sornex looks really good. Nice. We did Clemson rooms back in the day that were state of the art. Of course, they flip and go again. And Clemson is really still one of the top ones out there.
Yeah,
so big and massive. Clemson, I've been to all those other ones in Clemson just by the sheer size of it.
Mm-hmm.
And all the different pieces they have in there from different companies. They got us and Hammer and Sornex and all these other different companies in there. Wow. And it's a combination of all of it. So I still think Clemson's the best one that I've seen. In my opinion, I might be a little bit biased, but it's still. I mean, you walk in there and you're like, man, this thing. It's like a Crystal Palace. It's covered in glass all around it. It's like 20 top and bottom. I think it's like 28,000 square feet or something like that. It's a huge room, and it's just so open. So that's probably still the best room in my opinion, but everybody's trying to get caught up and do that. And some of these smaller colleges are building nice rooms too. The smaller colleges are building nice rooms. Heck, these high schools, if you go to South Carolina, you look at Gaffney High School, who won a state championship last year, who built that room. And it's a $3 million weight room, for a high school, total project. And that was the 2019 number. Imagine what it would cost right now. You're in the equipment business. You know what it costs now.
Oh yeah.
So I look at those rooms, like there's a Dorman down here, there's Spartanburg, there's Gaffney, there's Bowling Springs, and all these other T.L. Hanna, West Side down here. I mean, they all have, multi-million-dollar weight rooms at the high school level,
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, it's good. I mean, because they're spending, like you just said at the beginning, like they're spending more time and effort on these strength setups, which will actually improve their athletes' performance, but it didn't used to. I'm curious why. So do you think it just wasn't as much of a priority in the past? They didn't have the funding? Like, what was the factor before?
Well, I just think that as the colleges have grown into it, where colleges back in the day, so let's rewind back to Clemson back in early 2000s. There was 5 strength coaches in the whole department. Now there's 5 strength coaches for football. There's 5 strength coaches for Olympic sports. There's 2 strength coaches for basketball. Wow. There's a strength coach for baseball. So everybody has their own strength coach now. And so all that does is trickle down to the high schools too. They see how important it is. And they see the value of the kids getting opportunities to get scholarships. And so when kids get they're investing in their kids. And what it does, the more you can have a place where a kid can go train, it keeps them from doing bad stuff too outside of school as well. Yep. So that's the benefit as well is if the kid works and lifts, he's going to be more confident. It's probably I like to see the correlation of grades, by them training. What's the correlation of them making better grades, and maybe having more confidence and maybe actually trying to achieve higher goals than they normally would have had, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to measure all that, but it's got to be better. Because I know when I lifted as a young kid, I felt confident, maybe a little bit cocky a little bit, but but I was more confident, the strong, we were competing too. So it teaches you how to compete, teaches you how to be disciplined. You're learning even if you're not doing a weight room, if you're doing like a martial arts discipline or something, you're learning a new discipline. you're learning a skill that you can use for life,
Yeah, absolutely. David, this was super informative. I really appreciate the background, particularly on the Tsunami Bar. I don't actually think, funny enough, I think I was saying earlier, I was more familiar with the Earthquake and Bamboo Bar. You actually really have made me want to purchase a Tsunami Bar now, so I think I'm going to go out and do that. But thank you for the background and the information on the coaching. I hope our audience, particularly those who are in the high school and college demographic, can take some of the training techniques that you were mentioning and really be able to apply it to some of their sports specific applications there. But where can people find more information about Tsunami Bar as well as the business you're in with Williams Strength?
Yeah, so two ways. Tsunami Bar, www.tsunamibarsports.com. TSUNAMI barsports.com. So some people spell tsunami with an S, but it's TSU. If they want to look at Williams Strength stuff, go to www.totalstrengthandspeed.com. They can look at those things. And if they're interested, they can call me. Here, my cell phone number is 864-221-7269, and my email is coachab, like the word coach, and then the two letters AB at fatbars.com. Just email me, and I can set you straight with any of those. And so they can call, email, or go on the website and purchase as well.
Awesome. You're in the education department for Williams Strength, and so are you coaching coaches on how to train their athletes?
We are. We do that. We do what's called a Speed Force Max certification. Okay. We started off doing a Tsunami, but I wanted to take it deeper than that.
Yeah.
We teach you how to set up a program using Tsunami, with Tsunami or without Tsunami, so you can integrate the bar with your program or not have to use it if you don't want to. And this is based off all the cool thing was when I was training guys was not just the coaches. I was around great coaches, Joey Batson at Clemson. I mean, he's been there forever. Mm-hmm. John Sisk, who was at Vanderbilt, Georgia State, Western Carolina, Georgia Tech. Ruben Mendoza, who I coached with at Ole Miss. He coached at Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Chattanooga. He's at Wayne State now. That's where his kids go to school.
Nice.
And so I was around great coaches, around great head coaches. But I was also around great players. And that's what I tell people. I learned a lot from watching players and how they ran and how they worked. So you can see the great ones do things that some people just can't do. Yeah. So when you're asking the question earlier, how do you take the top shelf guys to the next level? They've already got it inside of them. You just got to direct them to it. You just got to take them to where they can go. And everybody needs a coach. I always tell my guys, everybody needs a mentor. And everybody needs a mentee. Everybody needs someone in their life that can pour into them, and everybody else needs someone they can pour into. You should have a river mentality and not a lake mentality. Yeah. Take your wealth of knowledge and pour into somebody else and bring somebody else up. Just their idea. Coach Mendoza and Coach Batson always said, make it better for the next guy.
Yep.
By making it better for the next guy, you try to leave the place better than you found it, but you also try to educate people and give them the wisdom that you have, because it helps save them a lot of headaches. If you want to be rich, you study a rich guy. You don't sit there and get beat over the head for 20 years trying to figure it out. You go to him first and try to see if you can take 20 years down to 2 years,
Yep.
So that's just my little tidbit.
I like it. I love the mission that you guys are trying to accomplish through that business. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we want to serve. I mean, that's our biggest thing. We want to serve coaches. We're all coaches. All my sales coaches and former players. All of them are. Mike Armstrong played at South Carolina, University of South Carolina, and he coached in South Carolina high school for 30 years. Todd Hagler's in North Carolina. He played at Illinois Ryan, coached at UNC Chapel Hill as a strength coach, and coached at A.L. Brown and Richmond there, and he coached at River Bluff in South Carolina. Carl Middleton down in Mississippi. He played at Mississippi State O-lineman, and he coached high school ball forever. At Oak Hill, was defensive coordinator there. Michael Batson, he's Coach Batson's son. So he grew up in a weight room. He was a puppy when I was there. He was just a little pup when I first started, and he's worked for the Panthers and other people. So he's got a lot of connections and knowledge as well. And then Will Ellison has been with our company about the whole time. He's in our office, so he knows everything. He can tell you about any product in our office, just to a T. He just knows. He's been with them so long. So that's what I'm saying. On our team, we have all these different strengths that people bring to the table that help make us good. But our main focus is we want to serve all these coaches out there that are pursuing. We want to try to give as much as we take. That makes sense.
It does. I think I understand now why Elite FTS has partnered with you guys as opposed to any other company, is because Elite FTS's mission is almost identical to what you just said, just within the powerlifting realm, and their educational quality of content is very similar to what you guys are trying to do with like the sport specific applications. I love that. Absolutely love that. And I'm sure that's what sets you guys apart too from a lot of other companies that are just trying to sell you on something because, it looks good or whatever. Like you guys actually invested and care about the athletes and what the equipment's doing for them.
Right.
So
that's some of the funnest part of the job when I get a chance to go work with the coaches and the athletes after we set the room up. For every room that we sell, we always try to do a clinic at that place. Just at least coaches, and if they want to invite other coaches to come in, they're welcome to. And so we just try to educate as much as we can by the coaches that we have. If you pick up one thing, I'm not saying that we know more than you know. We just may know something that you may not know that we can help you. And if it's just one thing you pick up, it's worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, David, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And guys, go check out William Strength and the Tsunami Bar. And I really appreciate it, David. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I enjoyed it.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening. Please give FreedomCast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean a lot to our business. Plus, it's fun to read y'all's reviews. See you next time.